Today's guest speakers. Lee brings to this work extensive training and experience in forestry, wetland restoration, and digital mapping, while Katherine contributes her deep background in interdisciplinary environmental education, including developing and launching the new Kentucky Green Schools program. Lee and Katherine both now work with the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources in the Martin Gatton College of Agriculture, Food, and Environment. They subtitled their presentation, Collaboration, Community, and Critical Thinking Through Environmental Education.
Thank you all for joining us live, and those of you that are watching after the fact, we're really excited to be sharing our work with you today. As Perry mentioned, I'm Lee Moser, and my colleague Katherine Bullock is here with us today. We'll be sharing a talk that kind of covers a little bit about what we've been doing for the past roughly 3 years on our team, kind of as an extension of our work. Extension, no pun intended, we are with Cooperative Extension. An extension of our work related to soil and water conservation through a climate change focused lens that also incorporates themes of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I was really excited to see in Perry's introductory slides that Stronger Together soil painting activity from the KAEE conference a couple years back in Moorhead. That just kind of frames how long we've kind of been going through this work with both the needs assessment of cooperative extension related to climate change, as well as the work related to the FLASH climate change related curriculum that you'll be hearing about today. So those themes of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we're expanding those to the thought of impacts of climate change on rural communities in Kentucky. So that's kind of the frame that we'll be spinning our talk into today as we work through some of the findings of our needs assessment of cooperative extension, and then kind of introduce the FLASH project, and then Katherine's going to give a masterful overview of the lesson plans and curriculum that she's been spearheading on our team. So if you have an interest in the kind of work that we do, anything related to soil and water conservation, feel free to connect with us. Our information should be available either within this presentation. Yeah, there it is. Or you can scan this QR code. Our team member that's not present today is Dr. Amanda Gumbert. She's really led the way with guiding us through this process of the needs assessment and developing the FLASH curriculum and collaborating with others. So the types of things that we deal with: soil and water conservation, ag and nutrient management planning, anything related to watersheds, streams, and then the intersectionality with climate change, which is so intimately related to the way we deal with water issues in our communities. Next. So we've framed this talk by utilizing the NAAE Guidelines for Excellence in Climate Action and Justice. So you'll see these key characteristics popping up throughout the talk. I don't think we've covered all 5 of these that you're seeing today, but we're going to start off by talking about locally focused and community driven. One thing that I want to draw your attention to that Katherine's done for you all on this slide is to provide a stable URL to download these guidelines that are not super easy to find at this point online. So with that URL, you'll be able to locate it and use it for yourself, or the QR code. So next. So we're starting off by talking about locally focused and community driven, which is really at the core of the work that we do in Extension, and then extending that out into the curriculum that's been developed through the FLASH project. Simply put, we operate based off of the needs that have been assessed of our clients in Extension, but also our agents that are embedded within our communities. So we really value that information. And then again, in the context of this FLASH project that we'll tell you more about, the input from community advisory boards and the co-development experience that we've had throughout the curriculum development process with teachers from local communities that know how people feel about issues in their community. They have a good sense of how to communicate about issues with their students and families. and really provide a wealth of insight into the ways that we can better connect as being outsiders of communities. So, next. So this journey into discovering kind of our place in addressing climate issues through our soil and water extension started about 3 years ago by developing a needs assessment that really was asking at its core, how concerned are you about climate change and its impacts in your community? What educational resources are needed to address the needs that you have in your community, and what are those specific needs, and how can we basically address this really challenging topic that's politicized and polarized within our communities, and do so in a way that uh, values community input, including that of our extension agents, and then kind of steers our work in a way that really addresses those needs. Next. So in 23, we developed this survey tool that we mentioned and sent it out to essentially the entire cooperative extension service for Kentucky State University and the University of Kentucky. In all, we received 195 responses, which we estimated to be around 20 to 25% of the respondents that we could have received from that pool. It included quantitative and qualitative measures and assessments throughout. You see a lovely word cloud to the right on the screen of some of the themes that popped up over and over. And really, so many of them are related to topics surrounding water, whether that's drought, flooding, extreme weather. People have really had it brought to the forefront of their minds with all the various flooding issues that we've had over the past several years specifically, but also the thought of extreme weather from tornadoes, droughts. We had a little bit of everything mentioned. And as you'll see in some of our upcoming slides, people are genuinely concerned in the population that we surveyed. So we are going to take that information and share it with you now. So one of the questions that we asked, overall, how important do you think it will be to incorporate climate change into your extension programs in the next few years? And about 82% of cooperative extension personnel that responded said that it's either very important or somewhat important. So people are seeing the signals, people are making the connections. At least those that responded are certainly making those connections. We asked, do you feel that you currently have the knowledge, skills, resources, and support to incorporate climate change impacts, mitigation, and/or adaptation into your extension programs? And nearly 85% of folks said no or I'm not sure. And in this case, we essentially took I'm not sure to mean, well, they could at least use some support. So we felt like by and large, folks didn't feel that they had the requisite knowledge, support to address these issues. Just want to kind of take a quick pause to identify some of our other team members that participate in this survey. Thinking about Dr. Lauren Cagle specifically, that was really instrumental in putting together our survey. So a big shout out to Cagle if you're around and watching at some point. So next slide, please. So, from those concerns, we wanted to ask what exactly causes those concerns. So, what concerns do you have about incorporating climate change into your extension programming? You see some orange highlighting and some blue highlighting. We felt that the orange are ones that we can address with training, and the others might take a little bit more thinking on things like administrative and institutional support. So essentially, folks were concerned about things like I'm not sure that I can present complex climate change information accurately. I do not have access to field specific climate change curriculum. I do not have good sources of climate change information to share. So we've directly responded to these top three by developing the web resources that you can visit in that are linked in the initial several slides. But number two up there, I do not have access to field-specific climate change curriculum. That's really where the FLASH curriculum that Katherine will kind of walk you all through comes into play. So providing tools for folks to have in their toolbox to address these challenging issues that people are experiencing in their local communities. Next. So another question, which of the following types of trainings would be most useful for you to incorporate climate change into your extension programming? People want to know about specific impacts in Kentucky. We've heard this time and time again. Even basic climate science. So Katherine led the way on putting together a Climate Change 101 document that we shared through our website. Just learning how to identify appropriate information sources and resources. And we've tried to do a little bit of that by vetting resources and linking them on our resource hub. And people are concerned about effective adaptation strategies applicable to their areas of expertise, whether that's things related to crops, livestock, or stream and watershed management. It really runs the gambit of touching on all of these different topics with the intersectionality of climate change. Next, please. So many of you have probably become familiar over the past several years with the Yale program on climate change communications, Six Americas super short survey, which is affectionately dubbed the SASE survey. And these are the questions that they ask to kind of do an audience segmentation exercise to discern what buckets people within a population fall into, whether that's alarmed, concerned, cautious, disengaged, doubtful, or dismissive in regards to climate change. So of our cooperative extension personnel, they were asked, how worried are you about global warming? How important is the issue of global warming to you? How much do you think global warming will harm you personally? And how much do you think global warming will harm people in the future generations? I do want to pause for just a minute to talk about terminology there. They use the phraseology global warming, which can be quite a political hot button phrase to use when talking about this. And we'll talk about some preferred language here shortly that we gleaned from our survey. But the reason that that's presented that way is because they've been doing this survey since the early 2000s. And to continue along the same line of questioning and make it comparable, they've kept the phraseology global warming in that Yale program on climate change communication. So what we're seeing here is that we have 39% of our respondents alarmed. So we have activated, ready, concerned extension personnel, and they're very much thinking this is an issue that intersects with their work, their communities, many of which, are experiencing really serious impacts of climate change. So next, please. So on to the language and terminology. We had a word association sort of qualitative question within that survey that asked them what phrases are least and most useful. And we find this to ring pretty true for when we're talking about climate change. Depending on the audience, hitting it directly with climate change is very appropriate and works well. You may get questions and discussions about, whether it's of an anthropogenic nature or not, but it's definitely something that people are seeing, and in the right audiences, that's a very appropriate thing to use. Extreme weather works in other audiences. One thing that we do try to avoid and was identified in our survey was that global warming is probably a phrase to be avoided unless your Yale program on climate change communication that's trying to keep their methodology straight over the course of several decades. Certainly a political hot button topic that will maybe start conversations that are not constructive to what you're trying to do. So next, please. So key takeaways from the needs assessment. The majority of our respondents, I think it was like 82%, felt that it was either very or somewhat important to incorporate climate change into their extension program. A portion of the survey respondents are already doing so in some way, shape, or form, even if they're not directly calling it climate change related work. And a majority of the respondents felt that they didn't have the knowledge, skills, resources, and support to incorporate climate change in a meaningful way into their program. Next, please. So we have been kind of working over the past several years, trying to develop workshops, trainings, resources, and publications. And then this FLASH climate change informed and related curriculum that relates to flooding to address some of those needs. And I want to circle back to that locally focused and community driven aspect. In the bottom left hand corner, you'll see Cody Napier and Rita Gross, who are two of the teachers in Breathitt County Middle School that we've been working with. And you see kind of a vision board of what this curriculum was planned to be, and it's really rung pretty true to what our initial meeting with Cody and Mr. Strong and several other folks kind of co-developed on site there in Jackson when we went down to visit them last summer before kicking off the actual instructional portion last fall. You can also see me there looking very, very sterile without people interacting with me before one of their back to school events that I think just happened again yesterday. So really getting out there and relying on the local expertise of the teachers to inform how to best approach these topics, and then do it in a way that's exciting for the students, that challenges maybe some of their perceptions and skills, and does it in a way that has hands-on learning experiences, specifically hands-on outdoor learning experiences like what Katherine will talk about a bit later. So next, please. So I've used the acronym FLASH quite a bit, and maybe I should define that now that we're about 10 minutes into my talk or our talk. It's flooding in Appalachian Streams and Headwaters, and you see some of the collaborating universities there. We'll mention them just a second, but this is an NSF EPSCoR grant program. It's a 4-year project, and we'll kind of walk you through the nuts and bolts of the project as an overview before Katherine deep dives into the curriculum. So next, please. So as I've mentioned, Eastern Kentucky and the state of Kentucky in general is no stranger to extreme weather events, flooding, disasters. So really the impetus of the FLASH Initiative was in response to the 22 flooding, and then it's just been reinforced by repeated rounds of flooding throughout the region. And it's been something that's really been co-developed with community, as we'll continue to highlight throughout this. So the collaboration aspect comes into play, thinking 5 different major universities: University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, Marshall, Eastern Kentucky University, and West Virginia University. There's a similar arm of this project going on in West Virginia that's doing community engaged research, really honing in on the fact that local communities know where flooding happens first, worst, and they're the ones that are experiencing the impact, so they have a very good idea of ways that we might be able to support their needs in their community. Other collaborators include Breathitt County Public Schools. You saw Ms. Gross and Mr. Napier, wonderful folks to work with, as are all the folks that we've interacted with down there. Letcher County Public Schools, Green Forest Work helped us with a field day, planting some trees and learning about mineland restoration. Friends of Cheat Watershed, the Cowan Community Center, and the Kentucky Association of Environmental Educators. So next, please. So just as an overview, the FLASH project objectives are to study water systems to learn what the causes of flash flooding can be in headwater streams. Historically, headwater streams are underrepresented in monitoring. Most stream gauges are on larger rivers. So better understanding how those systems react in rainfall events can help us better predict and provide warnings and plan in communities. Working with communities to build resilience and use new flood prevention tools. So one of the arms of the project is developing dashboards and warning and alert systems that tie into the stream monitoring systems to help better inform communities' decisions during events, and then to share the science with communities so that they can be better prepared to respond to these sorts of events that we know are going to happen. Next, please. So task 1, hearkening back to the objectives I just mentioned, You see Dr. Chris Barton out there instrumenting a stream, basically understanding and improving our understanding of floods and headwaters and how they originate and how they propagate downstream by putting in more stream monitoring devices, soil moisture devices, rain monitoring devices in those actual headwater streams. Katherine will show a really great diagram if you're not familiar with that phraseology. But if you think about a watershed, all that area that drains collectively to a common point, the headwaters are the areas in the uppermost reaches that respond very in a flashy manner to rainfall events. And then they'll be creating better models, predict flooding, and understanding data sources to better predict. Next. So you see Mary Bryden Miller there, Dr. Mary Bryden Miller and Dr. Tyler Mahoney, who are two of the co-PIs from University of Louisville, meeting with community members out in Letcher County, working with communities to increase their resilience through basically including them from the get-go of the project in the design and implementation of any products and research aspects that are being put on the ground. Next, please. And task 3 is increasing the community understanding of flash flooding. You see pictures from our field day at Robinson Forest, and the way that we're addressing this is by developing a middle school curriculum and working with local school systems to co-develop and co-deliver and transfer knowledge from the project out into the community. Next, please. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is a project built on collaboration on many scales and tiers. Breathitt County Middle School has been a wonderful partner, and through collaboration with them, the curriculum related to hydrology, meteorology, and disaster preparedness and planning was developed and delivered starting in the fall semester of 25 and just wrapped up its first round of delivery in spring of 26, and roughly 70 students engaged in this year-long curriculum. Next, please. So just to kind of check in, fostering knowledge and skills to foster climate action helps us to better prepare our next generation of community decision makers and leaders to exist in places that experience natural disasters. So really stressing the value of taking the information that students are engaged with in the curriculum and potentially using it to creatively problem solve and address issues in their own communities going forward. Next, please. So you remember seeing the whiteboard in one of those slides previously that discussed collaboration and co-development. So Katherine's going to be taking over to kind of show you how that has translated out into actual lesson plans and highlight some of the amazing experiences that we've had with the students over the past year. So I think the next one's you, Katherine, am I right?
Yes, can you all hear me?
You sound great.
Okay. Yeah, so as we piloted this this past school year, we're excited to bring this to the community of practice to really kind of give you a sense for what we're working on and also hopefully get your input. And so at the end today, as we wrap up, if you have thoughts of ideas or things you'd like to kind of talk through or help us with, please keep those in mind, jot them down, share them as we go, or at the end, that would be awesome. So as Lee was saying, we're teaching both the basics of climate change and its impacts, and we're working on helping students see how people and nature are really connected in this highly politicized culture climate we find ourselves in, right? It's hard to sometimes know where you can say climate change and global warming and those sorts of things. But while we are taking really care to make sure we have the right terminology, you can see here in our year-long overarching themes for the curriculum that you might not notice the term climate change here, and that was intentional. We alternatively instead of, titling the theme, we weave climate literacy and content into each lesson in a way that is kind of hopefully seamless and makes sense to students, and in a way that is practical. So with each lesson, ranging from the water cycle and watersheds to risk assessment and emergency preparedness, we try in this curriculum to really connect learners to understand the human impacts and opportunities that we have without using those terms that might be divisive. So to set the stage for each lesson, we begin with kind of an overarching investigative unit question as a reminder to students and ourselves that we're not just learning about hydrology or weather data, but how we as humans interact with potential impacts and responses to flooding in our communities. So we're indirectly studying the impacts of climate change and the role we play in it, even if we're not heavy hitting with those terms. And so we kicked the program off with lesson one with the foundational knowledge of how water moves and what might change its paths. So in lesson one's phenomenon, or what we might notice or observe around us, is that water is constantly moving through the Earth's systems, but that those changes in the land and weather and climate can affect how and where water moves. And this phenomenon, coupled with a few driving questions, kickstarts this lesson by learning about water's movement, what drives a cycle, what happens when water reaches different landscapes, and how human-made changes might affect this cycle. And as Lee mentioned in the FLASH grant task outline, one of those main pillars is to better understand and improve monitoring of headwater streams. And so we talked to those 8th graders about, first of all, what is a headwater? Where are they? Where can they be found? Why are they so important? And what can we do about them? So these streams, of course, are not only important and beautiful, they're in these kids' backyards, some of them, right? They make up over 80% of total stream network length in the US. So, but they're not monitored, as Lee was saying, as well or to the same extent as those larger rivers and bodies of water. And so these little headwater streams might seem unimportant, but they're very crucial. And so we try to really make local connections and highlight the unique topography of these students' backyards, or their grandparents' backyards, or nearby, because it's a beautiful landscape, and we try to make connections with the topography and how we can learn about these headwater streams that are close to home and have a big role to play. And of course, we review with the students. They've learned water cycle before, but we make sure that they have that foundational knowledge of, the basics of the natural water cycle, and before we jump into a favorite project, wet activity. Now, everybody knows, if you've been in EE for more than a minute, you know the incredible journey, right? From Project Wet. It's classic. Helps you understand how water moves. You embody the water cycle. You become that water molecule moving through the cycle, and it's a fun way to do that. And so what we did is we kind of, and what I love about EE in general is how those guides, those activities are really launching points for your own twists and your own additions, your creativity. And so what we did with our adaptation is we created, we used actual images of, soil and a river instead of the clip art, those sorts of things, little things that might make the game more local and more relevant. And then we also added a second part so that was adapted from Conserve Water Education Guide, which is a little older version. So we added in the Natural and Constructed Systems edition so that we're thinking about human impact and the water cycle. And then most recently, we just created a climate change edition where students will see how climate change and how land use change really does affect how water moves through the cycle. And so that's a really fun way, and I wanted to make note of it because it's a good example of how you can take a EE project activity and really build it into your program. And then, lesson 2, we kind of move into more of a focus on watersheds and water quality quantity issues. And we kind of start digging into how water moves through the landscape in different ways and how changes to the land can affect the water quality, the ecosystem, and essentially flooding. And again, we all are identifying some bigger picture driving questions to set students up for what we'll be exploring. So you might notice in that third bullet point, we focus on, quote, changes to land impacts, impact water quality, quantity, and flooding, versus explicitly saying climate change or deforestation, things like that. So once again, using the terminology that might be a little lighter, not as heavy-handed, to kind of hopefully make the connections, but in a way that's not as politicized or polarizing. And through hands-on experiments and modeling, students got to use different parts of their brains and bodies to hone in on various topics. And here we have Lee is introducing the stormwater floodplain model and engaging students in making it rain, observing changes in the landscape, and adding their hypotheses. And then, of course, just the simple, very low budget topography activity you can use to very simply create that topography in their mountainous region to kind of see how water works in their watershed. And as we move into lesson 3, and I know I'm just kind of really flying through these, but we just kind of wanted to give you an overview of some of these lessons to kind of give you a sense and hopefully get some feedback. But in this one, we start to explore the questions of why here and why not everywhere. You know, we're building on that understanding of watersheds and what's different about Eastern Kentucky. Why is flooding happen so often here, and kind of looking at what we can learn from the past and the present, and kind of looking forward. And we do just that in a very practical and personal format. We introduced them. We actually just got funding to give each school that we work with, and we're adding Perry County. We're very excited. So we'll have Breathitt and Perry this coming school year. But each school will get their own weather collection station, and then students will also create their own rain gauges to collect data in different parts of their county. So thanks to that NSF grant funding, each school will receive a weather station that measures humidity and light intensity, rainfall, temperature, UV, wind speed, and direction, and that detects lightning. So that'll be really neat for them to be able to take real data at their school. But then also they'll be creating, or they did create this past year as well, their own rain gauges to kind of look at the various spatial variability, different rainfall data that they might collect in different parts of the county. And as we as environmental educators know all too well, keeping things low cost and very simple is key. So our students collected 2-liter bottles, teachers brought them in, with teacher help, they got cut off the tops and inverted those to make the funnel. With Sharpie and rulers, we're able to kind of create their market sides for data collection. And we learned in the process. You know, we heard from teachers that, you know, some kids, you know, put them at their homes, they're outside in their yard, and one of them blew away, and, you know, things like that. So troubleshooting in this piloted year of like how to best create a sturdy rain gauge and those sorts of things were important. But after these gauges were deployed, excuse me, out in the various students' yards or backyard or nearby their homes, we then started to collect data into this lesson 4, into the intro to data, and kind of thinking about how much water and how the data collection might change based on location. And in this process, our students learned kind of the importance of accuracy, like I said, troubleshooting, expressing their data through graphs and tables and data points, things that they already were having to learn in this STEM class. They were already needing, you know, helping the teachers teach what they already need to teach, but also integrating our focus as well was a really nice combination. And then they were able to explore ways that data is being collected professionally. For instance, with the Kentucky Mesonet data, we were able to, you know, show them how to look up their county and look at the, you know, yearly rainfall and kind of, and to figure out how to use that kind of information, whether that was rainfall or stream flow data, looking at even, once again, not using that climate change term necessarily, but having students see connections between historical data in the trends of weather and climate, and starting to make some of those connections on their own. And then mapping that data. So like I said before, looking at how we might see some uneven distribution, but even within the same county of rainfall and why that might be. And helping students look at those different regions of their county and learn about how scientists can use the data to help predict some of the patterns that we see. So students learned about, I learned about Huck 12 and Huck 14. I didn't know those terms before this project either, but it's helping students learn about various sizes and spatial variability within the watersheds was really interesting. And they were able to take their data and pinpoint it with, into the map in real time so they could kind of compare that data, which was pretty neat. And as always, the very best part of environmental ed is when you can teach students about the natural world in the natural world. So, we tried to involve as many outdoor experiences in our program as possible. And we all know that middle and high school students often don't even get recess, let alone many field trips. And so it was really special to be able to, with that grant funding, to be able to pay for and to create and facilitate a full day of exploration at Robinson Forest, which is owned by the University of Kentucky. And it's really close to they're about 30 minutes from their school, I believe. And so that was a huge benefit for our students to be able to get outdoors and to apply some of the things we had learned in the classroom. So our students were first of all, they're very excited about getting out of school in general because they're kids and that's normal, right? But they also seemed to really respond well to the format, and the day went really well. We had students kind of rotated through, they were in groups and they went to various hands-on research stations. So one group, they said we had a hydrology, aquatic biology station, meteorology, climatology station, a dendrology and soil station, and even a community resource and career fair. So not only were these kids getting exposure to, whether it was looking for macroinvertebrates in the stream and learning about water quality and seeing the gauges where we measure stream flow and things like that, they were also meeting professionals in the field. So that was a really great career connection. A lot of wonderful volunteers came out. We had researchers from all the different, or most of the different colleges. We even had, there's Roberta Burns back there and her colleague, I'm forgetting her name, but we had various folks from the government and state agencies, as well as the staff at Robinson Forest and other researchers and extension staff. So really a great way to show kids to stop and kind of get involved in the outdoors and to really see some practical applications. And of course, if you don't have food and you're not comfortable, you're not going to learn, right? So working with the Family Resource Center and the teachers to get pizza and to, the Breathitt County Extension agent created a campfire for the kids. So, those important parts of education, as we all know, are really essential for kids to have a good experience and to be healthy and happy is important for learning, as we know. And so just a couple more pictures here of students and working with the researchers and really digging in, getting in outdoors. And hopefully they'll really remember this experience. I know I will. And this kind of brings us back to our key characteristics. We're looking back at this one, the attention on climate emotions. So, like we said, if you're hungry or feeling disconnected from a group, you're not going to really learn much, right? So we wanted to make sure that in addition to those kinds of things, we also were careful to make sure students felt that their emotions and their mental health was being taken seriously. And so as we launched into our next few lessons, we were careful to make clear the importance of students feeling comfortable sharing their thoughts and their feelings about their mental health and their well-being, because it's heavy stuff, the flooding and the history of that in this region. So the next lesson, it was all about, was a photo voice project, and it was a way to creatively get students to use art and writing to express themselves. If you're familiar with photo voice, it's a really wonderful kind of platform that it's pretty simple. It's three parts. You know, the students take photographs, they write a reflection, and then there's a art show, and they're able to share with each other and the public. So, you know, the nice thing is most kids have a phone, or we had access to phones or that have cameras, or we, you know, so it's not too hard to do the photography part these days. And it was neat to see how different students really took the written reflection. Some didn't do it at all because I forgot, but most of them did, you know, a short little reflection of like, I chose this picture because, you know, this creek is really important to me and my sister. It was like our third parent. I mean, there were some really sweet and interesting reflections from kids. And then some kids wrote full poems or got really vulnerable about how they feel about flooding in their area and things like that. So it was really quite a wide range of responses from their mission to slow down and observe the world around them. Um, and so, as I mentioned, you know, to have an art exhibit at the end as a culmination to the project was really great. We hosted it at their library there at the school, and these are some students and this Miss Gross, their teacher on in the yellow. But it was not only interesting to see the variety of the pictures and the artistic flair, but it was really neat to show them that, you know, we valued their thoughts on this topic in kind of a concrete way. To host this show was a neat way for them to feel hopefully seen in some way. Here's just a few examples I put in here from some of the students. Just really neat to kind of get their view of water in their from their point of view. And so from thoughtful captions describing their choice of subject matter to really, you know, some kids who got really more into the emotional impact, it really was pretty interesting and meaningful. Um, and some of you know Dr. Mary Brighton Miller runs the Ripple Effects International program. And so it was neat to show the students this photo voice program that happens all over the world and how they can also be a part of this. And so it was neat to show them student work from India, the United Kingdom, and even in Louisville, Kentucky, just as three examples. It was neat to kind of give them a sense for, you know, other kids their age are thinking about their relationships with water and how they view the world. So that was neat to introduce them to, and hopefully they can participate in it in the future. And then just kind of wrapping up, I'll just mention these last few lessons briefly, but we looked kind of at local flood history, and this was, you know, this was a little more where it got into kind of making sure that we identified ways to talk about how some of this information might make you feel, and how we can better prepare for the future based on the past. So I know a lot of you are familiar with this, you know, thinking about naming and recognizing, you know, acknowledging, recognizing, naming some of the emotions that you might feel. You know, it was nice in our group to um, we didn't actually do this. We didn't have time to actually put, you know, stickers on the motions, but if we have next time, I really want to take a little more time either before or after, and maybe both of the lesson to really have students engage in this because I find it very useful. We also had you know, it's helpful for students not to feel alone, obviously. And so I found this short video clip. It's a 3-minute clip of different kids around their age sharing feelings about their experiences with natural disasters and how they have learned from them, what they do to help cope, those sorts of things. So, um, and making sure, of course, that students know that there are resources out there way past these tips, you know, to know that, you know, to ask for help if they need it. And we took a step back into time. We looked back at the local flooding history and looking at, you know, environmental ed as a cross-curricular, multidisciplinary, looking at the history, you know, so trying to think about how we can make lessons more dynamic. We did take a walk back in time. We started with the 1939 flash flood in Breathitt County there, and so we walked all the way back through up into, we had a physical walk, kind of like the walk through climate change if you've done that activity. we physically, stepped for years, and we ended up in 2022, and this is their football stadium, and this is at the exact spot where we taught that lesson. Here's Lee and the teacher there, but it was very telling and emotional, really, to see how far, how affected their region is, and how they have responded. And so as we kind of wrapped up the semester, we started looking at some of those risks and those hazard assessments, and how we can learn to really use data and maps of local landscapes to kind of be aware of some of these risks and hazards. And so we used maps and talked about, looking even their own football field there that we just saw is in the floodplain, like seeing those maps and identifying some of those risk areas, and what the importance of being aware of this data and being prepared. And then just to wrap up with the characteristics, the last one we'll mention is the civic engagement for climate action. And really, this is a really neat one because obviously we all love to, plug students into the bigger picture of civic engagement. And so we not only did we do an emergency operation planning activity, but we also did a really great tree event, which I'll talk about, tree planting event in a second. But learning about what is an emergency operating plan or an EOP and what's so important about it. We did that with a simulated community flood response activity. And this is based on an activity from the University of Colorado's Center for Education, Engagement, and Evaluation, that helps the students work together as teams. They get resource cards and they really have to and kind of teamwork together of how to use their resources to solve problems in different parts of the watershed. So we have some student groups that are really close to the river, some that are a little further out, and they see that even, thinking about their location and the resources that they have, what they can do for their community. So that was really impactful. And also just letting them know that their county does have, they have plans in place, they have recovery plan goals, and there are things that they can do to even get involved. They can do some of these things like tree planting or volunteering or attending a local meeting, or building those emergency kits, kind of taking preemptive action. So giving them some of those skills to know what they can do was really helpful. And that culminating event I was mentioning, we worked with Green Forests Work, I always say that wrong, with Dr. Chris Barton here at the UK. And it was a wonderful day. We planted thousands of trees on a reclaimed mine site, and really, helping them think through what is the purpose of this? What are we trying to do? Looking at the improvement of soil and water quality, and the reduction of runoff and erosion. And so really great day for that. It was warm, but not too bad. In general, it was really awesome. I think this is a really telling image that we were able to show them. This is not the site we were at, but it was near, well, I don't know how close it is. But this is from the Guy Cove Watershed Restoration Project, also done by Green Forests Work. In 2008, this is what it looked like. And then in 2024, this is what it looked like. So showing the students that, even though right now you have a little dibble bar and a twig seedling, you can really help make a change over the course of time. So that was really great. So I know I've talked a lot and fast, so I tend to do that. I'm sorry, but we would love your input. If you have thoughts and ideas of what we could do in relation to this project, we would love to hear those. And we also have, if you have resource ideas of partnerships that we should explore, and really any other climate related products or activities, we would love to hear from the community of practice.